Hey everybody, welcome to Neon Wrangler's Saturday morning cereal. We might be a day early sometimes or a day late, but anyway, it's still Saturday morning no matter what. And we welcome you here to the cereal show, and where we talk about different topics that you're gonna find interesting, and you're gonna learn something, but your IQ is gonna go down. So I want to welcome my partner, David G.
Howdy, everyone.
And I'm the Neon Wrangler, as you all know. But today we got a couple topics on the deck, and I'll let you hear. You'll hear about them here in just a second. You'll get this is we keep our shows short and sweet so they're easy to listen to. But anyway, we've got we're going to be talking about drive-ins and gladiators. So that almost sounds like a movie name itself, Drive-ins and Gladiators.
Well, drive-throughs, not
I'm sorry.
drive-ins,
Oh,
drive-throughs.
drive through and Gladiators. That's even more exciting.
Yes.
David
So,
G.
real quick before we get
Yeah, go ahead.
another little snippet I'm going to add to the show is I have a large watch collection, and I think every week I'm going to show the audience which watch I have this week. This
Oh,
week,
cool.
I have my Seiko Men's Prospects SNJ025, which is an anti-digi. What's cool about this watch is this watch was actually made famous by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Predator and the movie Commando. He
Awesome.
wore this one back in the 80s. So just
Okay.
every week I'm going to just introduce everybody to a new watch. The other two things I want to talk about, I don't know if you saw this week, but Kaiju and Toho released that they are in fact going to be making a sequel to Godzilla Minus One. And it's
That's
actually going to
awesome.
begin production later this year. So they hope to have it out, soon. The other one is, and Mark, you'll be really excited about this one. Apple TV also released that they will be making the season 2 of Monarch of Monsters or whatever the show's called.
Yeah, Legacy of Monsters.
Legacy of Monsters. Yes, that's correct. And they did say that they will have more monsters.
I hope so. Last time it was Legacy of, 3 minutes of monsters throughout an entire season. So,
So, well, to get on to my topic tonight, uh, first of all, I want to let everybody know that my information source for these informations comes from just various sources: confirmed, unconfirmed, unofficial, official. I just provide you with basic information from the depths of the internet, and it's up to you to research it more if it's a subject you want to know more about. But anyways, tonight I'm going to talk about drive-throughs. We've all had been there. We love them. We hate them. They're at banks. They're at restaurants. They're at liquor stores. Hell, I in pharmacies, and I wouldn't be surprised if hospitals have drive-through. Get your shots. But we're going to concentrate mostly on the ones that we are most familiar with. Drive-throughs have actually been around since about the 1930s. There were several places that gave them a shot. Sorry, I'm reading my source material as we're going on here. I didn't have a whole lot of time today to kind of get myself in order for today's show. But the very first drive-up window in a bank was installed at the Grand National Bank of St. Louis, Missouri in 1930. So, but they only allowed deposits. You couldn't do anything else at the drive-through window for deposits. Now other restaurants have had drive-throughs at various levels since about 1945, 1948. But the one I want to talk about the most is the one that most people would be most interested in knowing about: McDonald's or the fast food chains and how they came about. The very first McDonald's drive-through, where do you think that occurred at, Mark? Or sorry, Neon?
yeah, that's okay. Uh, Very first one, I'm going to guess Denver.
No, believe it or not, the very first McDonald's drive-through happened in Sierra Vista, Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Now, how it came to be is interesting in its own story. The base, as you know, Sierra Vista, Arizona is the town outside of Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which is an army base down kind of along the border with Arizona, Mexico. There were some incidences going on. So the base commander at that time put out an order that no service people could be out off base in uniform outside of their vehicles if they weren't heading straight home.
Hmm.
Well, this kind of put a crunch on the local businesses, McDonald's included. However, the general manager of the McDonald's installed a window in the side of his McDonald's where cars could drive up and order. Therefore, the soldiers were not violating the order by their garrison commander saying they could not be seen outside of their vehicles, outside of base in uniform.
That's some good thinking there.
Yeah, so he saw a significant drop in his business prior to that, but then after that, his business picked back up. And McDonald's founder, Ray Kroc, loved the idea and made it a standard for all McDonald's. And McDonald's, after 1975, were remodeled to incorporate the new drive-through. McDonald's used to have the walk-up windows. I don't know if anybody here remembers those, but
No. Last
I
time
mean, they had to sit down.
last time I used one, I got hit by a car. But anyway, go ahead.
But, so from there they expanded, and drive-through windows have become a mainstay of American car culture in this country, and there, just a little tidbit for, drive-throughs, and I hope you get something out of this.
That's cool.
Anyways, Neon, I understand that you're going to take us back in time a little bit to the. Well, let's start this off with a joke. You know what Spartacus said to the emperor of Rome when they released the lion and the lion ate his wife?
What?
Nothing. He was gladiator.
Okay, boo, dad joke. I like it still though. Yes, that's pretty cool.
anyways, and then the segue into that is I guess you're going to take us back in time, Mark. We're going to talk about gladiators.
We are, yes. Okay, now my information is coming. A lot of it's coming firsthand, believe it or not. Not that I was there or anybody I know was there, but I'm going to tell you what we know from history, plus what my boxing coach taught me, because he visited the Colosseum in Rome. I'll start that way. I used to box, and my coach was a guy that he's an older guy, and he'd traveled a lot around the world doing stuff. And one time he had visited the Colosseum, and he had a discussion with the one of the tour guides, and I'll explain to you that discussion in just a second. But let me fill you in on a few things. Gladiators weren't always slaves. Sometimes there are a lot of volunteer gladiators because they may be considered the lowest rung in society, but they were also like highly desirable by women in Rome. We even have cases of Roman nobles and even an emperor in one case who went to the gladiator school, which is called a ludus, believe it or not, and trained to be gladiators so they could get glory in the ring and have that kind of, added clout to their name. So and by saying that, not all gladiator fights were to the death. In fact, most of them weren't, and I'll go into why I know this. But you had your different types of gladiators. Some of them look like fish. Some of them some of them look like fishermen or whatever. But they had these certain kinds of pairs that they'd pair up, and the guys would fight it out and do their thing. But my coach had asked him. He goes, "Well, God," he goes, "Do all these guys did they get killed in the arena?" And the tour guide was like, "Oh no." He goes, "It's very expensive to house and feed and train a gladiator. So if you own a gladiator school, you don't want your gladiators getting killed all the time. You know what I mean? You wouldn't make much money, and you wouldn't have anybody to present in the games." He goes, he said it was a lot like wrestling, American professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
There was Of course, once in a while, somebody would get killed, especially during like a special ceremony or something where they really did fight to the death. But the more than likely, they were fighting to put on a show, a good show. And if it was a good show, even the loser got to live, and the winner got to live too. So they had that going, where there were these matched pairs and all that kind of thing. And but it makes a lot of sense if you spend thousands of dollars or denarii back then training a gladiator, and you have him whacked. He gets killed in his first round or whatever. He ain't. He's done. It's just like in boxing. Whenever you got a fighter that's coming up, and let's say he's 7-0, and then you got another fighter who's 7-0. You got both guys are being groomed to be better, be champions. They show potential. You don't want to fight them against each other while they're both 7-0 or whatever. You don't want to do that. You want to stay away from each other. This is what really happens. Keep giving them what they call tomato cans. Guys who are like 0-9, or maybe not that bad, but more like 5-2 or something like that to fight, so you can keep developing that fighter. Same thing with the gladiator. Not that he's killed 9 people or the other guy has, but you want a guy that's you know close to his skill level, close to his ability, that kind of thing, because it takes a lot to feed and house and train a gladiator. And they used to call the gladiators barley eaters because that was the main food they ate, was barley. And what that caused was a nice layer of fat to grow over their muscles. So we see all these muscular type, Schwarzenegger type gladiators out there. That's not what they looked like. They looked more like, I don't know, somebody like Ric Flair or whatever, where you know, they look athletic, but they're covered in a layer of fat. Now, people would say, oh, they have that layer of fat, so if they get cut, the audience can see all the blood and all that. It's like, no, that's not what it was there for at all. In fact, I don't care. This is ancient Rome. I don't care where you were in the Colosseum. If a guy gets a cut, you're not really going to be able to see it. And he might sell it if he gets a cut, like a professional wrestler, exaggerate it and all that kind of thing, and continue fighting or what have you. But that layer of fat was actually there to protect them when they got cut like that. It would, sheathe their body a little bit and give them just a little bit of protection, and maybe a little bit of show, but it was mainly there to protect them. And so that's what they did, is they ate a lot of barley, and of course they got meat and stuff sometimes too to stay strong. And so that's what the gladiator's life was like, outside the ring. And that's why I said even noblemen and some of the other ones would jump in and want to be gladiators so they could go through this process. Now, if you had gladiators and everybody was getting killed, you didn't have anything worthwhile then. But, of course, sometimes they turned the gladiators loose on prisoners. That was, in a way, you saw games in Rome were 3 phases. First phase was in the morning, and that's when they had wild animals out there. They might have guys that specialized in taming and killing wild animals, and usually they weren't. Sometimes they were exotic animals like tigers and stuff like that, but usually there were things like boars or whatever, local wild animals, and they'd have guys out there killing them, and that was just kind of the warm up. Second, after that, during the gladiator games, is they'd have the executions of prisoners or whatever, and that could range from anything to turning loose a gladiator on them and actually killing them, to crucifying them, to beheading them, or whatever the emperor felt like doing to them to execute them. That was midday. Okay, so you could go have lunch if you wanted. Not, usually they provided bread and stuff. It was to feed the crowds, and but that was midday events. And after the executions came the actual gladiator competitions or games or whatever you call them, and that's when the gladiators came out and did their thing. Now, of course, there's some cases where slaves became gladiators and stuff like that, but a lot of times slaves just became slaves, and they kind of knew better. If you got into a good household and you were a slave, a lot of times it wasn't too long before the people who ran the household looked at you as a member of the family. In fact, there's lots of cases where, you know, slaves would die and their owners, if you will, would put up great effigies to them and tell them how much they missed them and all that kind of thing. And, you know, how they loved them and that kind of stuff. That was not uncommon because I guess once you were a slave in a good household in Rome, you know, you had it made. You didn't have to go climb into that damn, you know, arena or whatever unless you really wanted to. So those are some facts about gladiators I wanted to share with you. It wasn't all death all the time, and it wasn't all, you know, the horrendous murder that we see
But
in some
wasn't
of the.
there,
Go ahead.
let's say, wasn't there stories of some gladiators who actually retired from being gladiators and actually retired quite wealthy?
Oh yeah. In fact, I'm sorry I missed that. You're right. There were a lot that would retire and become wealthy, and they were when they retired, they were given a wooden sword called a ruderius. They were given this wooden sword, and once they had that, that was their retirement gift from the empire. But a lot of them that retired were, by that time, famous gladiators, and they were not only if they were slaves or whatever, they'd be considered citizens of Rome, or if they were already citizens of Rome, you know, they could start making money. In fact, they, you know, had their purse from when they fought, and they could start small businesses. They could start, and if they're lucky, they could start a big business or open their own gladiator school. A lot of them did make out really well, you know, because of their fame and their notoriety, and they had their wooden sword, the Rhetoriarius. So that was really cool. And but yeah, you're right. They did retire fairly wealthy. Yep.
Very interesting.
Yep. So
Hey
hey,
guys.
hey
I
that's
mean, I mean,
what's about Spartans? That was my wife. Sorry.
I was going to say, speaking of my joke earlier, but Spartacus was a slave who became a famous gladiator, and well, he died because he led a slave revolt. But you know,
Right. Spartacus, yes, Spartacus was a slave. He led a slave revolt. He basically got a bunch of the gladiators together and said, "We're going to get out of here, out of their situation, and we're going to revolt." And what they did was they got loose and they went down to the south of Rome or of Italy, and there were supposed to be boats there waiting for them to take them elsewhere, and those boats didn't show up. So then they fought their way all the way up Italy to the near the Appalachian Mountains, or not Appalachian, the Alps, and up
the
there,
Alps. Yeah.
up there they could have all gone home to their original homes and all that. But somebody, and I don't know who or why, they decided no, let's turn around and go sack Rome, you know, sack Italy and all that kind of thing. And so the gladiators all marched together, with the German faction wanting to march alone. They tried to go back down and start taking over Italy. Well, that was a mistake. That was a big mistake. Instead of being raiders, then they became an army. And once you put an army in Rome's face, you get crushed pretty quick. And that's what happened to Spartacus. They killed, you know, they ended the rebellion, killed a bunch of guys, and you know, you start the story of I am Spartacus, I am Spartacus. Well, we don't know, that probably didn't happen, but most of the guys that did this got crucified, so that's not a pleasant way to end. But why they decided to turn back around and go back into Rome when they were scot free is just baffling to me. So,
Well, cool.
all right.
Fascinating. I did find that fascinating, you know, just
Thank you. Yeah.
I always fell in the gladiators just fought to the death, and they all
Yeah.
eventually died. So
Yeah. To die for the emperor. No, rarely did they do that. So now you know the case. And a lot of this was told to my boxing coach by the guy who ran the tours at the Coliseum, today,
so
where Godzilla sleeps now. But I'm looking forward to
yes, I
the,
saw that.
the -1 sequel. But anyway, guys, thanks for attending today's Neon Wranglers Saturday morning serial.
Absolutely
Yeah,
enjoyed having you here.
great. Yeah, it's great having you here. Like and
Please,
subscribe.
please, yep, like and subscribe. Subscribe to Neon Wranglers channel. Get to watch us every week,
Yep.
and you also get to watch Neon Wranglers' other content that he does post from time to time.
Yeah, I will. I'll probably try and do that soon. Post some other stuff, and that'll be back in the other vein that we did is unknown stuff and mysterious stuff like that. But yeah, it's
So,
great having you all, and we will see you next time on Neon Wrangler Saturday Morning Serial. Thanks, Dave.
enjoy that cereal. Thank you, Neon.